Hi everybody, Scott McGinnis, Armsportvideos again. We're still in Salt Lake City for the USAF Unified Nationals, and so what I've tried to do over the past few In Focus interviews is get people on, tell their stories, a little bit of history of the arm wrestling. Through my travels throughout the U.S. now, we're talking with different people, and I started talking to. First of all, I guess I should apologize. My guest, as you can see, sitting beside me from the AAA is a friend of mine, Mr. Frank Bean. Frank, nice to see you.
You too.
Thanks for sitting down talking to me. What Frank and I were discussing off camera, we were discussing a little bit about the history of arm wrestling. And during our conversations, I thought, geez, Frank, you and I have to sit down and let's talk about this on camera. He was all game, so here we are, and we're going to have a little history lesson this morning and see what we come up with, and try not to get sidetracked into a whole lot of stories and laughing and giggling and going on that we've been known to do. So,
History for 55-year-old memory.
There you go. So, where do you want to begin in this? You want to begin right at the beginning, or?
Well, if it's history, beginning as far back as I know, I guess.
Okay, that's great.
I guess with the starting of arm wrestling goes back as far as it's in the pyramids of Egypt.
Sure.
It's never been in the Olympics, even though it's shown in the Roman times. But as far as organized sport, I guess it started out with Bill Sobranis and then Dave DeVoto pairing up to form WWC, which was the World Wrist Wrestling Council, and their big tournament was Petaluma, California.
Okay.
A lot of people, including myself, saw it on ABC Wild World of Sports, which in our time was the big ESPN of the day.
Yeah, and you know what, though? I remember watching that, so I thought it was great at the time.
It lived a long life.
Yes.
Yeah, we didn't pick up young guys. The wrist wrestling was a style that they gripped hands in the middle. You had to pin the opponent on the opposite, on your forearm. But it was the first organized, let's say, with rules, a table, and structure to it.
Okay.
And that goes back 60 years. And that was predominantly a West Coast as far as the starting of it. But with ABC Wild World Sports, everybody that ever watched it saw it. So it was a national thing. I saw it. I was going to school, engineering school in Baltimore in 1971. It was on the TV, and I had guys telling me, "Oh, you ought to do that." And I'm going, "Yeah, right." Those are and then 5, 6 years later, I'm meeting these people that I saw on TV. It was fairly neat. But I started out, as a lot of people, wrist wrestling.
Okay.
That's all that was known. The other association that was starting up in the 60s was American Arm Wrestling Association and the World Arm Wrestling Federation, at that time WAWF, by Bob O'Leary in Scranton, Pennsylvania.
Okay, so Bob O'Leary started the American Arm Wrestling Association.
Yes.
And the WAWF?
Right.
Okay.
And he was holding so-called world tournaments at that time, which was from the 60s into the 70s. And about 1976, he produced the first Armbender magazine, which I was going to bring one just to give to you. But anybody that really wants one can email me, send me $5, I'll make a copy, because it's really interesting. It's the first publication of Armbender, and in it has the WAWF, which was the World Arm Wrestling Federation. Arm wrestling is
two words? Okay.
I like it in one word, though. And it kind of splits it from, and separates it into our sport.
Yes.
Arm wrestling. And then in 76, with Ed Jubenville, Bob and Ed met because they were bodybuilding judges.
Okay.
And physique judges were what Ed Jubenville, who even has a book out on physique, muscle movements. If anybody would ever pick it up, it's a very good read.
Okay.
Ed could move every muscle in his body. He had a stroke and was in a hospital and couldn't move anything, and they said, well, he'd never walk again, and he took it upon himself to start exercising, trying to find how to move this muscle, and in doing so, he moved every muscle, including ones behind his ear.
Wow.
And did a fantastic show with it. But Bob and Ed paired up to bring American Arm Wrestling Association more tournaments, and then in '76, John Miasnik came in as the Canadian representative. Raj Das came in as an international representative from India. And then in '79, Bob and John got together, and they termed it the first real Worlds. Was in Canada, where it was multiple countries.
Okay, you say so, multiple countries. So do you remember? So how many countries we were talking about back then? 4 countries, okay.
The United States, Canada, India, and Brazil.
Okay.
And those were the first real world tournaments with multiple nations under the WAWF banner.
Okay.
In the 70s, there was a lot of other associations that started popping up. Some of them were small, some were large. I would say, to recognize them, John and Colleen Corbett from California had a fantastic amateur association. They had the World's Amateur Tournament every year. They had a fantastic following towards the end. Before they retired, they had multiple countries coming into California in the amateur standings. Amateur they never took any money.
Okay.
I even know people that had won money and turned it back in so they could stay in that amateur ranking.
Oh, really?
That tournament, because it was such a good tournament.
Okay.
You had people like Wes Atkinson in Texas that created TAAA, which was Texas Amateur Arm Wrestling Association. And under his rulings, you could compete in that association as long as you had not won a AAA, Petaluma, or WPAA tournament for a year. And what that did is that brought in newer people that you didn't have to compete against these, not professionals, but better arm wrestlers. And it generated more new blood to the...
Okay, so it keeps bringing in new blood every year type of thing in every tournament, so that the sport obviously has to go through some growth because of that. Okay, great idea.
A lot of associations... and I'll go back to Texas because that's where I lived at the time.
Okay.
That's where in the mid-'70s, I was coming home from work early in the morning, and I heard on the radio the first ever wrist wrestling tournament was in the state of Texas was going to be held, and a fellow by the name of George Kay, who was a referee for Petaluma, was putting on, lived in Houston. And that's where names like Joey Womack and Mel Brown and Gary Ray start coming out. We all started at that tournament.
Okay.
Gary Ray started his own association and started putting on tournaments in Houston area. In fact, that's where I won my first trophy, was at a Gary Ray tournament. We go back that far. And he's still a force to be reckoned with if he ever shows up at a tournament. At that time, people like Steve Simons out of California started the WPAA, World Professional Arm Wrestling Association. Each, let's say, a major association has had its peak, apex, and then kind of fallen down, and it's like a sine wave with arm wrestling. It comes up and then with entries and people, and then it kind of dies off. The economy has a lot to do with that too. But in the 70s, I'd say the dominant association of the day was WPAA.
Okay.
It was a different style. It had a cup in the table, donut, let's say, and a two-start go. You said ready, go. Supposedly, 4 seconds later, you had a second go.
So it was ready, go, go.
Right.
Okay,
and
that's
that
different.
Was a really nice style for a lot of people. In other words, you get up there, you cannot move your shoulders during the first 4 seconds. So it was ready, go. But if you could take somebody here, or as Cleve Dean, which that name we'll get to later, would take people, if you could pin them in the first 4 seconds without moving your shoulders, ready, go, poof, you could do it. But you could get somebody on your side of the table, and on the second go, just bury them if you could.
If you could do that, okay.
I need to back up and retrack on the WAWF a little bit in AAA. That was started out as a sit-down. It was not a stand-up tournament. Originally, everything in the WAWF was sit-down. So you had a sit-down style.
Okay.
Let's go to the 70s. You had a sit-down AAA tournament, WAWF Worlds. You had Petaluma wrist wrestling. You had WPAA, which was a two-start go and a little different table. So you had 3 different styles.
All right.
And when it came to arm wrestling, I, like many, would go to all of them.
So all you would compete in all the different styles.
Right.
Okay.
If it said arm wrestling, I was there. And then as Karen came along and we got married, we've known each other since 6th grade, so she kind of followed me in after about the 2nd year of me pulling, and she would go to all the tournaments. She entered her first tournament and won. I mean, I don't know how that works, but she was very good.
Yeah.
But there's people that I really admire in this sport, in that they have longevity. They entered, like I did, just any style, any association, didn't matter. And one of them here today, I think the world of, as far as he had no bias for anything. He had no preference for one or the other, which is Alan Fisher. He's still going strong.
Yeah, he's going really strong, yeah.
He's just one type that he goes back that far.
Okay.
And he's been good in all aspects of it, where not everybody's done that. Some people are better at wrist wrestling and arm wrestling than two-start go, sit down, stand up, and Alan pretty much kind of covered it all.
Okay, yeah.
At this tournament today, which, by the way, we're at the 2008 Unified Nationals in Salt Lake City. That's where we're sitting. It's like dinosaurism. Blast from the past. We see the Woolsey brothers come in. We see Bruce Way, Alan Fisher, of course. There's others that are here that go back a long way. But I'm sitting in a room looking around, and Clay Rosencrantz is another one that I used to watch on TV. And the people of today don't even know who's in the room, don't know who these people are or what they were. You mentioned a name like Virgil Arciera, and they go, who?
Who?
You know,
Yeah.
whoa.
I have a question about that. When I talked to Cleve when I was in Georgia for a tournament. So back then, a single elimination?
Yes.
So that's it, one and done? You could be out?
First wrist wrestling tournaments I went to, it's $10 to enter, single elimination, you're gone.
Oh,
WPA had a little different twist.
Okay.
WPA, you had double elimination the first round. After that was single elimination. What Steve Simons did, he tried to structure his organization under tennis because he was a tennis player.
Okay.
And what he did is he had, instead of a luck of the draw for putting you on brackets or anything, he had, like, if he figured you were decent, I was decent, Clay Rosencrantz, Alan Fisher, all in the same room in the same weight class, you'd have a bracket, you would, and then he'd fill in the gaps.
Almost kind of like a seeding type of thing? Okay.
See, figuring that these top 4 people would meet at the end and it would be a better show.
Okay, yeah.
AAA has been luck of the draw, where we've gotten to the point where you actually draw a number, and that number designates where you get put on the score sheet.
Okay.
So you have different styles, different rules, and you had to adjust. But my theory had always been, if you went to all the different styles, in other words, WPAA in Texas in the 70s was the predominant game to go to. And then you went to a AAA Nationals, and it was a fast one-start go. And then you went over to Petaluma and wrist wrestled. It made you an all-around better arm wrestler.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because you picked up little things from pulling different people in this, and if you were good at it, I mean, it would teach you to become better.
Okay.
The WAF, let's say, started taking off as they got more and more countries. By the 90s, there was other associations that started popping up. M.G. Harmon started USA in Virginia, which I think Leonard's association now, Leonard Harkless. There's IAF, which is Bill and Jerry Cox.
Right.
I don't want to miss anybody. I'm not trying to slight anybody. I'm just, old man memory. You had Charles and Susan Weems in Atlanta that were under the wrist wrestling banner. They put on great tournaments in Georgia area and southeast United States. So you had a lot of people getting into the sport, getting associations or companies or whatever, and then putting on tournaments. And all this kept the sport alive, because if they didn't, especially when ABC Wild World Sports wasn't showing Petaluma anymore, the sport pretty much would die. without this.
So, well, back in those days, this was pre-internet days. Where now, I mean, we have the internet to keep in contact and give out information. So, what did you guys do back in those days? Was it just flyers and phone calls, or?
It was the good old boy system. The best example is I didn't hear about a lot of tournaments in Texas because everybody was so close in competition that if they knew about a tournament, they might not tell you about the tournament because they don't want you to come to the tournament because they don't know what the outcome might be. But at the same time, if you were the tournament director trying to put one on, it was you contact as many people as you could. You, if you had the money, would get an ad in the newspaper in that area.
Okay.
Radio spots, but all this cost money.
Yes.
One of the largest tournaments in the 80s as far as AAA. Karen and I, Wes Atkins and Gloria Atkinson, put on the 84 and 85 Nationals at the Astor Village Hotel across from the Astrodome. Had $15,000 in prize money, $5,000 in trophies that were gold Greek columns that were 5 foot tall, first, second, third, and fourth, 500, 400, 300, 200. Of course, back then we only had 5 men's classes, just started 3 women's classes.
Okay.
So it was dispersed a little better than all the classes that you have in the Nationals now, but it was one of the first times really, other than the wrist wrestling, that arm wrestling got the West Coast and East Coast together, where Alan Fisher and Steve Lusby and people like this came over and met people like Dave Patton in the middle of the road, Texas. And the outcomes were really neat.
Okay.
John Brezink was young at that time, and he came in '85, and he beat George Gibbons in a heck of a match. George Gibbons was to me, the best sit-down puller I'd ever seen.
Okay.
He was out of, I believe, Connecticut. I think his son's starting to pull now. I really would like to see George come back, even if it's in the old-timers division, because he was a heck of a puller. And as I said, name some of the names. We're seeing the dinosaurs come back.
Yeah, they're coming out again. Wow, good stuff. And we'll take a break from there, and we'll be back in just a few moments. Okay, so we're back again with Frank Bean. So, so let's get back just to a little bit about what started out as the WAWF, what we know now today as the WAF. So when that first started, and you're telling me that there was only 4 countries involved in the very beginning, so did that grow quickly, or was that like a very slow building?
It had a slow progression up until about 1990.
Okay.
In 1990, it quadrupled in size between 90 and 93.
Okay, now, and okay, for what reason? That you think? Just give me your opinion about it.
There was, well, Russia split up, and the Eastern Bloc countries became their own states.
Okay.
And each one has their own Olympic federations, and so Mr. Miraj Das put out letters to all these individuals and the Europeans, and he pretty much kept this going all around the world to whoever he can get to mail to, usually off an IOC list.
Okay.
Because they're sports affiliates.
Right.
They're sports oriented. And he started picking up these other countries, and Europe came in full force about that time. In 1990, in the World Tournament, or 1991 in the World Tournament in Israel, Netanya, Israel. It's the first time we saw Russia as an individual, Soviet Georgia, Lithuania. These countries just all of a sudden appeared.
Okay.
And within the next 2 years, that doubled and then doubled again because word of mouth also, because these countries are so close together, they're like our states.
Okay, yeah.
Not as big as provinces, but, they're a little closer proximity, like New England.
Okay.
And so this fellow went to this country and had a friend, started arm wrestling, and then by word of mouth there, it came into bloom.
Okay.
Karen and I held the World's Tournament in 1990 in Houston, and I believe there was 18 countries there. Very good tournament. I designed medals; they were nice. 24 karat gold, triple plated.
24 karat gold medallions.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I took it off the Olympic standards, which was at least 3 1/8 inch round.
Yeah.
And then they're supposed to have so much gold in there as well. I don't
Yeah.
have that money, but triple plated it in 24 karat gold.
Okay.
And triple plated sterling silver on the seconds, and that's what we gave. And then in 2000, we held it in Virginia Beach and designed the medals. The Olympics now said that you could have your own design as long as you had X number percentage ounces of gold and silver in it. So it was a little rectangular Statue of Liberty because the United States.
Okay.
It was still 24 karat gold. So try to put quality into the sport. But getting back to 1990, I think we had 18 countries on the roster. Around 1996, there were 78 active paying countries. Not all those would go to tournaments, though, but we would have 30 to 35 countries show up. Now, they might have one or two representatives, and then you had Egypt at one time that had 105 entries.
Wow.
So it went from one end of the spectrum to the other. In 1998, there was a split in the WAF, political more than anything, and I won't get into it because it really, at this point, I don't think matters.
No.
The new people coming into sport don't really want to know about that, and it's over with, so I don't see the reason for hashing onto it. The split occurred. Fred Roy is leading the WAF. I'm general secretary for another WAF, which was original, started by Bob O'Leary, kept that, but it's in basically name only. And I think in the near future, when Fred and I sit down with a couple other people, I think we'll just end up, and it'll be said, there's one, and be done with it and go from there. There's been Olympic hopes. Olympics, it's hard. We actually, going back into the late 90s, the World Arm Wrestling Federation, the WAWF, early 90s, changed to WAF.
Okay.
It was easier as World Arm Wrestling being one word, federation.
Okay.
That was that way for a long time. We had a representative on our board, when it was one WAF, that dealt with the Olympics. They were always at the meetings, and anytime they could get information to them about arm wrestling, they did. And one of the suggestions from the Wrestling Federation of the IOC said, your name's too close to ours, can you change it? And then World Armsport Federation.
Okay, so that's where, okay.
They also said if you go to the GAISF, which is a governing body, sports body federation, it's easier to take a step through there. You basically have to go through a smaller group to get to the Olympics, and you have to have one world federation and one individual country federation under that. So then all your problems start happening. In each country, you had multiple associations, and they're trying to get together, and this one doesn't want to do that, blah, blah, blah. So the Olympics is hard. Now you see that the Olympics are cutting out so many sports. Why would they want arm wrestling coming in?
Yeah, okay.
The other thing is we have an image problem. I've got a letter from IOC years ago when I was writing them. I know Simon Barachoa did a lot of research and talking to him and found out a lot of information. But as he's found out, and also previous to him, a lot of other people like myself tried to deal with the IOC. I tried to deal with the USOC under WAF's banner, and found out USOC won't talk to you unless you're with the IOC first, which is kind of backwards to me.
4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so before the break there, Frank, we were talking just very briefly a little bit about the Olympics, and anything else to add on that? Or
well, just basically, any sport, especially our sport, which is very hard to market and get people to watch on a TV, that it's a very hard road, if ever, that we will get there.
Okay.
But I won't say that we won't stop trying. Everybody will continue to try. Getting back to some of the little things, WAF, one of the sad things that happened was that in the late 80s, early 90s, I think it was, John Miasnik passed away. Later on, Ed Jubenville passed away. These are founders of course, Bill Sobranis, passed away, and all of us are going to go sometime or another, but these people should be remembered. And one of the ways was at the time in 1990 when Karen and I had Worlds in Houston, John, like I said, had already passed. And Karen came to me and with this idea of the John Miasnik Award. She said, what do you think? I said, well, great. And like I said, at the time, he was the only one that had passed. So we went to WAF, which was Doss and O'Leary, and what do you think? And the John Miasnik Award was
created from there? Okay.
Basically from Karen Bean's idea. So we presented it for a number of years on stage with the Canadians, showing that we worked together because the vote to who was the recipient was supposed to come from Fred Roy, Kathy Morrison,
okay,
Karen, myself, and whoever was the recipient the year before, and any of the countries send in nominations.
Okay, yeah.
Of course, that was like anything else. It was very hard to get new nominations, but that's how that started, and the tradition of the John Miasnik Award was created.
Okay, so I can't speak on the world level. I know that on the Canadian level, every year the CAWF gives out a John Miasnik Award as well, and I was very fortunate enough to win one in 2005, and to this day I'm very humbled. But in Canada, this is a huge deal. This is a very big deal in Canada, and John Miasnik is really well respected and really well looked up to in Canada. I can't speak for the rest of the world because I haven't been around long enough to really know what the name means out in the rest of the world.
Well, John's name, other than the Canadians and the Canadians saying John's names at the World's Tournament, has pretty much started to fall down the wayside like the names I previously said in the sport of arm wrestling that, people go, who? But Karen and I had the privilege to know John.
Okay.
And we got along with him. We also had arguments with him, but it was always for the betterment, and we walked away friends.
Yeah.
And this was our part of keeping John's name alive after he was gone, but I think it might need to go further now, being that we've lost some others, as far as not the exact people that founded an individual association, but worked with them, like Ed Jubenville, for example. But to set some of the records straight, because being that Karen and I are not on stage from the United States presenting this award anymore like we used to, a lot of people think that it might have originated from Canada. Well, I just want them to know how it came about.
And I'm laughing because what you can't see, of course, off camera is Karen Bean waving.
Saying she had
and
one
she's won a John Miasnik Award as well, and
she didn't know it. That was, I threw her name in the pot, and of course it was very well received, and she got the last one that was presented at our WAS.
Okay.
So that's a real honor there that she actually got the award that she created, but it was a long time coming. But there's some decent people that have won it. It was created not just for an executive or a referee, but just anybody. You could have a sponsor that was really doing well for the sport and had the sport in mind for a number of years, and they could get it. Or
Okay.
an athlete. It was designed for a particular species.
Oh, okay. Was anybody who's really working to promote the sport of arm wrestling and further the cause, I guess, for lack of a better
Right.
word, type of thing? So, and
In John's name, because he was a force to be reckoned with in the sport of getting it to be known.
okay. Okay, so we've covered the Olympics. We've covered the WAF had a split and everything. So what's continued on for there? Like, what's continued on for you guys from there?
You guys being
Yeah, the AAA, the Beans of the AAA.
well,
There were times when countries were going to two different worlds.
yes, and that was always bad because you never get into the Olympics. You never get through GAISF. You'll never go anywhere because there's two different associations. Even if the same people went to both, you're not one body sticking together that you can forcefully show that you're organized.
Okay.
One of the things that I think happened just recently, to me, is just overwhelming, is that Dave DeVoto of the WWC, World Wrist Wrestling, has taken Karen and put her on the WWC board. And that's monumental in a number of ways. One, this is a male-oriented sport as far as anybody thinks arm wrestling, they don't think of a little woman, just 5'1", being in it. She's on the board of both the WWC and the American Armsport Association, which was American Arm Wrestling Association. It's the same. And is board of the USAF as well, being representative of WWC.
Okay. So
the two founding associations of Armsport, let's say, you have a woman that's on the board of both. And she's on the board for the USAF, which is the unified.
Okay, and that's where we're here now. Just give me briefly. So, Bob O'Leary, I don't know how you got Bob O'Leary owned the AAA.
Yes, he started owned.
Yeah, I don't know
the American Arm Wrestling Association and the World Arm Wrestling Federation.
Okay.
He turned the World Arm Wrestling Federation over to a board.
Okay.
He had a board in the AAA, but he solely owned it. He retired when he hit 60.
Okay.
60. I'll say 60, just in case it was 62, in 2000, and called Karen and I and said, I don't know of anybody else that can run this better than you, and said, here it is. And we purchased it for a small price of $1, which is legal, and the rest is that part history. And told us within 6 weeks the next Armbender magazine was needing to be published, and Karen and I had never even been on the internet at that time. And I had to go back to work on a ship, and she published the first magazine within 6 weeks, learned the programs, and I've never seen the woman have too much on her plate as far as, overwhelming until she got into arm wrestling. Now her plate looks like, last call at a buffet. But
so since 2000, so after Mr. O'Leary retired, so that's when you guys continued on running events under the AAA banner. Okay, so and still today you guys are still running. You're holding
the
nationals.
AAA.
Okay.
It's Karen and I.
Okay, and now you guys put events on all throughout the year?
We have state directors that put tournaments on all over the country.
Okay.
And then we host the nationals in a different state each year.
Okay.
Which plug here, it'll be in South Carolina in 2009.
We're at in South Carolina?
Columbia.
Okay, Columbia, South Carolina, 2009.
We've had it there twice. This 2008, we had it in West Palm Beach, Florida. We've been all over the East Coast, even out to Nebraska and Idaho. So, we go a little everywhere.
You go places that make me sweat.
Well, you have the bright lights on. If you were in snow, you'd be sweating.
I tell my wife can attest to this too. I sweat watching television, so it doesn't much matter. But I know I was fortunate enough to get to go to Buffalo for your event last year, and that weekend in Buffalo was incredibly warm. West Palm Beach this year was, I think, even warmer.
Okay, for the record, then, it's you.
It must be me.
The heat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that in the tournament yesterday, I'm listening to people behind me, and I'm talking to people like Ron Bath, who very good friends with, known for years, lives about 4 hours away from Atlanta, with David Randall and those big guys. And listening to people behind us and talking to Ron, it was like, they don't even know who's in this room. These people that are arm wrestling now, and these people that are arm wrestling now, let's say, are in the last 5, 6, 7 years. And it's like I said, the names of John Woolsey and his brother Jim and Clay Rosenkrantz. These were names of the 70s that is like, whoa! They were on TV, and people go, who? And Alan Fisher says, you really ought to do a history on this. I said, well, Scott's got this coming, but Alan also is one that you really ought to do a history with all the personalities, because In 2000 in Atlanta at Nationals, after the tournament was over, we sitting down, gabbing, and we started telling stories of what this guy and us and so on. Alan had tears rolling out of his eyes, and he says, "You guys got to write a book." Well, there's some people probably don't want us to write that book, but the camaraderie in this sport is just overwhelming.
And you know what? And I'm glad we got to sit down and talk about this a little bit, but that is something that cannot be captured on film. And people, because people wonder why I'm doing this traveling and going, and arm wrestling is arm wrestling. I have a great time watching arm wrestling, but it's this kind of stuff. You know what? We're hanging out, we're sitting down for breakfast this morning, and it's stories. Well, that doesn't get captured. It
doesn't get captured, and some of it shouldn't. But the personalities are what makes the stories funny.
Yes.
I mean, here Richard Lukes is back into the sport as a big man. He got injured yesterday. He was sitting down at breakfast, and Ron Bath and I were talking to him, and the stories came back. Oh, you remember Atlanta when you and Bobby Hopkins were throwing peanuts at each? Oh, yeah, I remember that. And then that leads into another story and another story, and it's like it's never ending. And that's what Alan was saying yesterday. That's what you really got to do.
So then, you know what we need to do? We'll have to sit down again. We'll have to actually have a list of names in front of us.
Oh, you better get signed releases then.
We don't have to tell any bad stories.
They're not bad, but you still better have releases.
Because some of the names and some of the people are just phenomenal. For me, in the sport of arm wrestling over 20 years, it was an incredible thrill. For me, I got to sit down and talk with Cleve Dean when I was in Georgia. And I'm going back home, and I'm all excited, and the new guy's coming over going like, well, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? Do you not understand what I just said?
Now, that's a big man with a big personality, I tell you.
It is.
And we have some Cleve Dean stories, but the best one is David Randall. Very good friends to have Cleve Dean stories because they go back 30 years.
And that was, and that was another name. I got to meet David at the same tournament, and you were working, I think. And I went out to dinner with Karen and David and a few other arm wrestlers, and I think he had me in stitches for the entire. It was hard to eat my meal. It was.
And there's Mr. Rosencrantz.
Yeah. Just walking by off camera. So for me, this is.
See, I know him.
So for me, that's what it's all about. More than just the arm wrestling. It's the people you get to meet and the stories you get to hear.
And the thing about this is, if you meet the people, don't tag an association with them because
it has nothing to do with that. Yeah,
it doesn't have anything to do with that. And there's a lot of people. I'll back up. Not a lot. A few people to put emphasis on what association.
Yeah,
well, it's like I said originally when we first started. If you were an arm wrestler, you went to everything, and it didn't matter. There was no politics.
Yeah.
And that's the way it should be. It should be clean, clear, just sport.
Yeah, and that's you know what, and that's what I try and do. It doesn't matter to me. I just go have fun, and
we have fun.
We and that's the stuff that doesn't get on camera. And people ask me all the time, "Where's your camera?" My camera is away where it's supposed to be. Right? So, that was great. I think we will have to. I'll have to get some names, just to throw out some names, and just tell a few stories. Nice, clean stories.
Oh, they're clean.
Everything is
hilarious.
Good. Yeah, and I don't know. I keep hearing about this quiet one. I've yet to find out who he is. But
well, I get home and I hear that Karen's the one that she does all the talking and Frank's the quiet one. I'm going, okay. For those who don't know.
Yeah, and then for those who don't know, actually, when you get to actually watch this, now you'll probably understand the post that I made on the Northeast board that says "The Quiet One Speaks." For those that thought he couldn't,
yeah,
here he is and has done it.
Don't wind me up.
That's great. Well, Frank, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate you sitting down. It was great to see you again, and I'm quite sure we'll catch up again in the future.
I'm sure we will.
All right. Thanks very much, Frank.
Thank you, Scott.
For Frank Bean, I'm Scott McGinnis for Armsport Videos here in Salt Lake City, and we're out of here. Thanks.